Born on May 20th, 1935, Joseph Mujiga was known as the poorest president in the world up until his death a few months ago on May 13, 2025. Joseph Mujiga was an Uruguayan politician who served as president in Uruguay from 2010 to 2015 after being long imprisoned for his guerrilla activities with the Tupamaro Revolutionary Organization. Mujiga, also known as Pepe, was born to parents of modest means and grew up in Paso de la Arena, a rural neighborhood of the outskirts of Montevideo. In the early 1960s, Mujiga joined the Tupamaro, a revolutionary organization founded by Raul Sendic and others whose goal was to undermine Uruguay's repressive leadership. Within a few years, the Tupamaro turned to violent actions, including arson, political kidnappings, and assassinations of a number of police officers and some others. Mujiga was arrested several times for his activities and was convicted in 1971 of having killed a police officer. He escaped from prison twice, but was recaptured both times and served some 14 years in all. As a prisoner of the brutal military dictatorship that seized power in a coup in June 1973, Mujiga was tortured and spent long periods of time in solitary confinement, including 2 years at the bottom of a well. After the failure of a 1980 plebiscite on a new constitution that stopped short of the restoration of full democracy and amid an ever-growing economic crisis, the dictatorship negotiated a return to democratic government in 1985. Mujiga and the other political prisoners were freed later that year under a general amnesty. The Tupamaro joined the leftist coalition known as the Broad Front, which is Frente Amplio, and reorganized as a legal political party. The Movement of Popular Participation, that's Movimento de Participación Popular, MPP, for the 1989 elections. Mujiga became one of the MPP's leading voices. Meanwhile, he moved to a farm outside Montevideo with his longtime partner and fellow former Tupamaro member Lucia Topolansky, who also remained active in politics and would later serve as Uruguay's vice president from 2017 until 2020. They married in 2005. Mujiga served one term in the Chamber of Representatives, that's 1995 to 2000, and was then elected to the Senate in 2000. In 2004, he was re-elected to the Senate as a member of the Progressive Encounter Broad Front coalition, which captured majorities in both legislative houses and whose presidential candidate, socialist Tabere Vasco, also won election. In the process, Mujiga was sworn in as Senate leader in February 2005. He also served as Minister of Agriculture from 2005 to 2008. Riding a wave of approval for Vasquez's successful center-left government, Mujiga sought and won nomination as the EPFA's presidential candidate in the 2009 elections. One of his chief competitors, Danilo Astori, a fellow senator and former finance minister, eventually joined the ticket as the vice presidential candidate. During the campaign, Mujiga was the front runner, but his guerrilla past, which he has at pains to show was well behind him, stirred controversy as did his public criticism of the leaders of some other South American countries, including Argentina and Venezuela. Although the EPFA maintained its parliamentary majority in voting on October 25, Mujiga did not secure the 50% plus one share of the votes necessary to prevent a runoff election for the presidency. In the runoff held on November 29, Mujiga defeated former President Luis Lacalle Herrera of the National Blanco Party and took office on March 1st, 2010. Under Mujiga's leadership, the Uruguayan economy continued to prosper, posting consistent growth in GDP and capita GDP while maintaining low unemployment rates. Against this backdrop, his administration introduced progressive legislation that altered Uruguay's social landscape. In June 2012, Mujiga proposed that the government legalize and distribute marijuana to cut off revenue to drug dealers. Then in November, a bill was introduced in the House of Representatives outlining a framework for government regulation of marijuana production, sales, and consumption. By the end of December 2013, the House and Senate had passed the bill, and Mujiga had signed it into law. In October 2012, Uruguay had become the first South American country to allow abortions up to the 12th week of pregnancy. And in May 2013, Mujica signed a bill that made Uruguay the second country in Latin America to legalize same-sex marriage. Mujica was constitutionally prohibited from seeking a second consecutive term, but in much the same fashion that he had ridden into the presidency on goodwill generated by Vasquez's regime, he was able to return the favor as the popularity of Mujica's rule paved the way for Vasquez's triumph over the National Party's Luis Lacalle, that is the son of Mujica's 2009 opponent. In the November 2014 presidential runoff election, Mujica left office the following year. Mujica died on May 13, 2025. He was renowned for his modest lifestyle and consistent rejection of the privileges typically associated with political office. Notably, throughout his presidency, he chose not to reside in Uruguay's official presidential residence. Instead, continuing to live in his small private home. He also flew in economy class and donated nearly all of his salary. His presidency was marked by progressive social reforms and an emphasis on civic ethics and personal humility. His way of life in public office earned him deep respect among many Uruguayans and drew international attention as a rare example of personal austerity in high office.